Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, the 2025 NFL Draft is in 1 week from tonight. Here at Saturday to Sunday, we continue to cover it wire to wire. If you have missed any of the last couple of days' podcasts, please go back and check them out. I talked to Sigmund Bloom. Then the next day, we talked quarterback prospects with Corey Kinnan. And then most recently, almost 2-hour podcast with Matt Waldman, breaking down so many of these prospects, talking about the biggest storylines with the draft just a little over a week away. And tonight, really excited. It's been a long time coming. Back on the show, special guest, Jon Ledyard. Jon, welcome back to the Saturday Sunday Football Podcast.
Thanks, Paul. It's awesome to be back. I think last year we missed. We've done this for a long time. I've come on before the draft with you guys. Always appreciate it, and always glad to be on here with a great fan base.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it because I think there's so much intrigue surrounding this class. And let's start with the quarterback discussion. Your maybe general thoughts on this class as a whole. I know you follow the Steelers closely, maybe what they're thinking. What do you think they're going to do? What do you want them to do? And just a little bit about your thoughts on this unique quarterback class. How many do you think should go round one? Is it just Cam Hayward? Is there anyone else you think warrants it? So maybe just share your thoughts a little bit on these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I guess my most controversial take is that I think everybody else is probably 2 tiers below Ward. Quarterback's such a, landing spot dependent place that I have a hard time saying like, oh, for sure he's just better. Like for sure. Yeah. I mean, Brock Purdy might be the best quarterback in that class that he was in. It's just really difficult to really say that with as definitively as I feel like you can say with other positions. But just based on what we know, I think, of the information available to us, I do think he's clearly like the best guy. And then I think really the tiering after that is much closer than probably most other people do. That's probably my only other. I think most people agree it's not like a great class, and most people agree Ward's number one. I would just think there's a bigger gap, and then I would think the tiering, Jackson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, Will Howard. To me, it's close between those three. I know Tyler Shook is in there for some people. He has a fatal flaw I can't quite get past to put him with that other group. Milroe is not as good as those guys on tape, but if you're just one of these people, I mean, Hurts wasn't very good on college on tape, not as bad as Milroe was, I don't think, but you're one of those people that believe in upside in the person. Sure, if you want to put him second, I understand at least why you're doing it, even if I don't agree. And I think it's a long shot for him to get there. So that's sort of how I see the group, is that like, I think that there's three guys that all, it just really depends what you want and what your organization can support in terms of Dart, Sanders, and Howard. And then I think Milroe is just sort of like the wild card where like there are probably a lot of places you go that it might not work at all. And then if he lands up in the one spot that it could work, that he could be developed and they have the right plan for him and they're going to maximize him, obviously he's probably the biggest payoff of any of these guys, maybe even Ward included, if he were to become good. So that might feel like a really long shot to some people. I agree that it is. Some people, would rather go that route than ever draft Quinn Ewers, for example. So that's sort of how I see the group right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes complete sense. And if we circle back, a follow up to the Cam Ward discussion, it's interesting because I feel like when people compare him to last year's class, I haven't heard a single person put him ahead of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May. But then I think after that, you've seen some people say he would be ahead of J.J. McCarthy. Some people, behind him. Some people like him more than, what they thought of Knicks and Panics before we saw them in bits and pieces for Panics, obviously, the whole season for Knicks. Where would you kind of put Cam Ward when comparing him to ceiling upside readiness compared to last year's quarterback class?
Yeah, so I'll just look at it from my perspective going into the class. He would have been probably 5 for me, I would say. I had it sort of Williams, and then thought the next group was pretty similar, like in terms of where they were at. I think I had them all in the same tier, if I remember right. And I think I had it May, then McCarthy, then Daniels, I think is how I had it. Obviously, Daniels was awesome and looked like the best guy of the rookie season. Maybe I had it something like that is how I had it. But that was sort of like all those guys were really close together. All those guys liked a lot. And McCarthy didn't get to play, and May looked great in the worst situation in the league, or looked good in the worst situation in the league. So we'll see, where all that ends up in the future, I think. But I would think Ward would be behind those 4 for me because I like those 4 quite a bit. So maybe he'd have been in that conversation with Daniels a little bit for me, but I think that's how I saw it basically coming into the draft. And I wasn't as high on Penix or Nix. I think that, like I said, this is why it gets so hard. Landing spot matters so much. I think there's so many places Nix could have gone that would not have been good for him. And ultimately, at the beginning, I didn't know if that situation was going to be good for him with Peyton. And I think it's to his credit and what his strengths are that he was able to pick up on a very wordy scheme and a lot of stuff that plagued him early in the season. He was not in a big issue by the end of the season. He seemed much more comfortable. So obviously there's a long way to go for him, but I think you have to like the start. So, I mean, now given where it's shaken out, like, I don't know that I would have expect him to have the rookie season that some of those other guys had that I was lower on maybe than others. So yeah, I would say he'd probably be still 4th or 5th, maybe basically in that group. So still good player for sure, because I was pretty high on last year's class. But I think I would have had enough concerns that he would have been ahead of Penix for me probably, and ahead of Nix for sure. But I think it would have been somewhere between those first 4 and the other 2.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people's takes are pretty similar to that. If we look at this class, do we think, your opinion, do you think this is going to be a year like we way back when we saw Christian Ponder, Jake Locker, right, pushed into the first round, or another year like more recently, like there was buzz that Malik Willis was going to go round 1, and Matt Corral and Desmond Ridder, and once upon a time Drew Lock, like all these. Every year heading into the draft, we always hear this guy's going to be a first rounder. The quarterbacks are going to be first rounders, and then sometimes it materializes like the Ponder Locker year. Other times it doesn't. There seems to be all this buzz that we could get 4 guys, and maybe we get 5 in like the top 40 if we're talking Milroe and Shook and Dart with Sanders and Ward. When the dust settles a week from tonight, on that Thursday night after round 1 ends, or even if we say the beginning of the top of round 2, do you think it's more like that year that guys are going to get pushed up, or do you think all this pre-draft buzz will be just that, and it will be buzz, and some of these guys will fall a little further maybe into night 2 than that they probably should, but right now the buzz is that they're not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not much of a reporter on these things, to be honest. Like, I hear what other people are saying, but I don't, for me, I really don't even look at I don't even do a mock draft until like the week of the draft. Like, I don't even start thinking through all the scenarios necessarily. I mean, it's unavoidable in the top 10. You obviously start thinking about combinations there, but just when you're scouting guys and seeing where they go, but I really don't even map it out that far. So I couldn't say with a ton of confidence, but I would feel like just off the cuff that the over under would be like 2.5. And I would probably go over, but probably in like a trade back into the first round scenario for some of those teams at the top of the second. That would be my inclination, just thinking that somebody gets aggressive to jump in there, and then 2 go before that would be my guess. So I would probably take the over on it, but I don't think it's going to be, I think it might be 1 in the top 15. So that would still be a huge deviation from the normal structure of the class. And I think Shedeur Sanders, for example, very much eye of the beholder, right, type of player. And Jackson Dart probably too, to be honest. So, and the fact that not a lot of teams need a quarterback, I think, is a big factor in this one too. There are a lot of teams that feel that intentionally got to a place where they could feel pretty comfortable about where they were at. And so there are only a couple that need them. So in those teams, a lot of the ones like the Giants, for example, the Saints, I'm not convinced that they'll take a quarterback in the first round, but will they jump in from the top of the second back into the first, or would they stay there and take one? The Browns could be another example of that. So just because I think there'll be some thirsty teams at the top of the second that don't want to take one with one of the high profile picks in the early first, I bet we get over that 2.5 and we get probably Dart in there too. But I would be pretty surprised if it's 4, and I would be pretty surprised if 2 or 3 go in the top 15 or 20 picks.
Yeah, and I think it kind of leads nicely to my last question at the quarterback position, and it's more of your personal preference here. When you're looking at these quarterbacks, and if you were running a team, and I'll use the Giants as the perfect example because they're picking there at 3, and maybe they like Sanders but don't love Sanders, or maybe they like Dart but don't love Dart. Do you think it warrants taking a guy that high even if they internally believe his ceiling is, let's say, if they think Sanders can become somewhat between Tua and say Geno Smith? Like, is that warranted? Because I know that's like a big topic here in New York, that a lot of conversation, like some people are so desperate as Giant fans that they want him to pull the trigger and just take their shot. But it comes at the expense of Abdul Carter, right? Or Travis Hunter, depending on who Cleveland takes or not. If it becomes a average starting quarterback, and yes, if the Giants had Geno Smith or Tua, that would be a huge upgrade for what we've had over the last X amount of years since Eli retired. But is that what they should be looking at as a pick at the top of the draft when you're passing on blue chips? If you were running an organization and you were quarterback starved, would that be enough of a ceiling, in your opinion, to pass on a blue chipper if you're hoping that ceiling is somewhere in that Geno to Tua type spectrum?
I don't think I would be taking a quarterback there, especially with a potentially special prospect on the board. It's just hard because you don't know exactly when you're going to be there again. And so I think you'd have to feel just pretty strongly about the guy. I don't, so I wouldn't. So it's easy for me to say, perhaps as a team, they feel like, oh man, they're neck and neck, or maybe Carter's a little bit better as a prospect on the board, but they still love a quarterback. Then you got to take the quarterback if that's from a process standpoint anyway. But I just don't feel that way about any of the guys in this class. So I would just rather, I don't think there's going to be a lot of added value now or in the future with a lot of these guys, especially with that pick compared to what a player like Carter could bring to the table for your organization. So to me, I think the first 3 picks are really easy. I don't, if you want to feel that way about Cam Ward, cool, pull the trigger. But to me, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are clearly the best 2 players in the class. I don't think Carter doesn't come without some level of concern, but I mean, the stuff that he have is so elite, the pass rush athleticism is so elite that you will take there are going to be some downside plays with him. He's on the ground more than you'd like for a guy who's going to go in the top 3. But the plays where he makes are just there's literally 2 guys in the league that I've ever seen that can make do some of the things he does athletically at that position. So he just is so rare from that perspective that I am at that position with how much it matters. I'm just taking the small chance that I don't think there's a lot of bust potential, but I'm taking the small chance that it ends up being, because he's so physical too. I just think he's going to figure it out. I wish his balance was a little bit better as he cornered, but there are, for a guy who tries to run under the table at full speed on every rep, yeah, you're going to lose your balance sometimes and give up the edge and lose contain, and that's going to happen sometimes. But he also he creates paths to the quarterback. I mean, Donovan Jackson is a very good player. He might not be a tackle, but he played like one of the best tackles in the country down the stretch of the college football season. I don't think he's a tackle in the NFL. And he couldn't even exist on the field with Abdul Carter when they played in that Penn State Ohio State game. It wasn't a fair fight at any stretch of the imagination. Carter either fell down after he got by him or he beat him and he got pressure or sack. I mean, it was complete, it was just a murder. And Jackson, I think, as I said, really good player. Played Texas great, played Georgia great, played down the stretch, played Notre Dame great. All these games at tackle, he's playing really good players and he's playing well. And it wasn't even he didn't belong in the same field as Abdul Carter. And I think he's going to go probably in the 20s, that guy. So, that just gives you an idea of how good the type of prospect we're talking about Carter is, just with the high end potential. So yeah, I'm just not passing up on that guy for a guy that he plays the most important position, but he's kind of mid. That just doesn't excite me very much.
Yeah, and that's where I am too on the whole situation with the Giants. And I think most fans have started to gravitate towards, let's get the blue chip player, keep building the roster out, take a shot if you like one of these other guys enough, whether it's Milroe or Sanders falls and they come back up, or Tyler Shook or somebody like that, or Dart. But I do think the right way to approach it is, if you don't see a star, if you don't see a guy that has star potential and top 10 type potential to compete with the best of the best at the quarterback position, you can't pass up on a guy like Abdul Carter, who it's only his first year playing the edge position too, right? So some of how good he was already, there's still room for growth and development too, as he refines his game as a more of a traditional edge rusher. And I'm sure he'll be using a variety of ways for sure at the next level. But yeah, I'm right there with you. You talked about,
let me add this too. The regime's dead in the water. It's their only chance is some miracle performance by a quarterback, that they probably draft. That's the only chance that they get, is that they land one of these guys that's like a Dak Prescott level type of steal, something like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To me, that's the only path these guys keep there's just no answer on the roster. This isn't going to be a markedly better team to the point where Amara feels like keeping these guys, I feel like, for the year. I would just be so surprised. And I think Joe Shane has done some things wrong for sure. No question about it. He may be lost. He may be an overset. That's very possible. I've said this many times on my podcast. I understand at least his reasoning, even if it hasn't worked out. I understand why he did the things that he did more so than I understand a lot of other GMs who keep their jobs. And so I'm not saying he should keep his job. I'm not like, if Mara was always already making an ultimatum and saying like, this is what it needs to be. Like, you guys are going to win a bunch of games. You're going to get fired. You should just move on. Like, there's no reason for that. Nobody works well under an ultimatum. But if the regime is dead in the water outside of a miracle, then yeah, like drafting a quarterback now to be with guys that you're probably ultimately going to get rid of, even if that isn't what Amara's thinking right now. Like, from a fan's perspective, they're just looking at it logically and saying, well, yeah, why would I want to draft a quarterback to be under this regime that's about to get fired? And then who knows if the next regime is even going to really like him or want to get their own guy if he doesn't play well, So timeline wise, I don't think it makes sense either, even though the organization is probably not going to the year. Like, I don't think Mars like, yeah, I'm going to fire these guys next year. Like, he wouldn't think that yet at this point, but just all of us from the outside looking at it logically are just going to be like, yeah, I mean, like, if they draft a quarterback now, there's just such instability around that timeline that would be a concern for me too. Like, we could just end up punting this whole thing, in part because the infrastructure, which matters so much for a quarterback, the stability part is not there. So I'm not saying Mara will intervene. I doubt he will. That's not how he manages from an ownership perspective. But I think that, if he were to, it would be to say, hey guys, don't draft the quarterback. Like, take this really special pass rusher that could be a part of our team for the next 15 years. Let's take him at this high value position, and I'll figure out the quarterback with the next regime that comes in here.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, and that's my biggest concern, because I don't even mind taking a shot on Sanders if he falls and they can get him, and I'm intrigued by Milroe, but there's going to be so many good players at the top of that second round, whether that's the pick they take a quarterback or that's the pick they move up with and give up another pick to move up to get the quarterback. And then it's like, if they don't find a way to keep their job, the odds of the new regime really wanting this quarterback and not wanting to pick their own quarterback is so low that it's like, yeah, you're passing up options on guys like who could be like, top of the second, maybe Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon fall, or, you talked about Donovan Jackson. Like, he could fall to the early 30s and be a plug and play, really good offensive guard that could be a long-term starter and be above average to good at the next level. And if you make the quarterback the pick and it doesn't work out this year or show glimpses this year, yeah, the regime probably is going to be gone. So it's a really tough situation when you're talking about these teams, especially when the regime's been there a little bit and they need the quarterback. Like, they don't have the longevity. And I'm right. I don't think a lot of Joe Schoen's moves in the moment have been all that bad, but it's just it's a result-oriented business, and it's the bottom line. It's like, and if you had him and Brian Dable in a private elevator, they would probably both say them making the playoffs that first year forced the hand with Daniel Jones to come back, because the New York media and Mara was never the pressure from the New York media and what would have been like, and even Mara probably like, we can't let the quarterback who just won a playoff game walk out the door. Yep. Maybe his issues was, maybe it should have been the tag. Maybe he should have let him hit free agency and seen what the market was. And then if some team did get aggressive, match it or whatever. So that's where you can say, but I'm right there with you. I think a lot of his decisions in the moment weren't egregious, but the results at the end have been.
Like the Saquon thing,
exactly.
I get it looks terrible now because he just had this awesome season. He wasn't going to have that with the Giants. He was going to take up cap space and not add to winning. So yeah, it took him going to the best organization in the league to maximize him as a running back, which 100%, he's an awesome player, but that position needs other elements more than any other position on the field. So it's smart team building, even though I know that it gets fans going and it probably gets John Mara upset too. I understand that, but it's smart team building not to pay that player. Now, could he have paid that player if he didn't pay Daniel Jones? Yes. There's lots of ways around this where you can look at it from another perspective and say, yeah, Saquon Barkley could still be a Giant, and like that wouldn't have killed them. And I'm not saying it would have killed them. And obviously the fact that he goes to their big rival and they win the Super Bowl, I guess, is really, really painful. But I'm just saying, if we just look at it in a vacuum, emotions aside from a process standpoint, where the Giants were at as an organization, not paying top dollar for an oft-injured running back who hadn't maximized in recent years in the Giants and wasn't going to this upcoming season either, was a smart team building football move, even if the result of it, as you said, of it looks like bad on paper for him and obviously got him ridiculed along with the Hard Knocks spirit. So I think he's had some optics going against him when his process has actually been okay. But at the end of the day, like you said, he gave money to Daniel Jones. That is unforgivable. I understand why he did it. It didn't work out. It's his job to get that right, even if at the time a lot more people were like, "Oh, that's okay," than were at the time. The other thing I just want to add with this quarterback class, Paul, is that the other reason I don't think that it's right for people to feel so confident from my evaluation standpoint anyway, that the number 2 guy is going to be better than the number 6-5 guy in this class. That's a big difference to me than other classes. I have a lot of guys in the same tier in the next group. And so, I think that that's worth considering. Like, I think there's a decent chance Will Howard ends up being a better. Maybe this gets clipped and people are like, oh, Will Howard ends up being horrible and Shedeur Sanders ends up being a starter. That's a possible. I mean, Shedeur's higher than him for me. But I think that there's a chance that happens. Man, if you could make your first 2 picks and get Will Howard at 65, like, I think you'd feel really good about that. I would love, that would be a really good, if you get Carter or somebody else, Howard, I think that's a really good process in terms of going about this. Like, but a lot of people, like, we got to scramble to draft them high, and they certainly have to consider it at 35. Or 30. Are they 35 or
34?
34. Sorry. At 34, they certainly have to consider it. I understand that. Like, that was where I'd start considering it based on just kind of reading what their intel is on where the quarterbacks are going to go. I think there's a decent chance Howard's not there at 65 just because that's how these things go in the draft. But that would be my other caution was it's not even so much that I devalue the position for them. Even if all the other things weren't an issue, I'm just not that convinced that whoever comes off the board at number 2 or number 3 in the draft, the second quarterback off the board, I'm not convinced that player is so much better than a guy who could come off the board in the 60s. And that would be a real concern to me at quarterback. So again, some of that's my process and my opinion, but it certainly seems like that's kind of the consensus opinion out there, is that there's not a lot of, Shedeur has just kept it as the number 2 guy on the consensus, but I don't think there's a lot of consensus or like strong belief that there's a clear cut number 2 in the class from people out there.
Yeah, and then especially after, even if we say Sanders is that guy for a lot of people, then like Breveru, like 6 or 7 is really completely jumbled up. Like, I know like Pro Football Focus really likes Dylan Gabriel, and there's other aspects. Some people like Kyle McCord, and you brought up Will Howard, and obviously the upside with Milroe. So there's a lot of moving parts there at the quarterback position for sure. You brought up Saquon Barkley, so let's use that as the pivot point to Ashton Jeanty. Do you see him on a level of like a Saquon and a Bijan when they were coming out? Do you think the tier between him and Omarion Hampton or whoever you have as your RB2 is as big as some appear it to be? And we talked about that infrastructure. Do you think a team like the Raiders or the Bears, who are the 2 teams probably most often connected with Ashton Jeanty at this moment, do you think either of them have the infrastructure in place to pull the trigger on Jeanty in the top 10?
I don't think Ashton Jeanty is on the tier of those guys.
Okay.
I thought I was not going to have to say this anywhere other than my Behind the Paywall podcast, but apparently I'm cooked. I think he's really good. I think he's RB1 in the class. Pure runner. He might be on the level of some of those guys. Like, he's probably a better textbook runner than Barkley was coming out. I don't think he has the special creation ability that Barkley has, I guess. So, that's who has. Adrian Peterson, maybe, so if we're looking at the Adrian Peterson, Saquon Barkley, I actually did have Bijan. I thought Bijan was that special, plus the pass game components, which is what I'll get to, that I think really separates some of those other guys from. But just in terms of guys that I've scouted or kind of was aware of, I was too young to really scout Peterson, but I watched a ton of college ball. I knew he was just like an absolute freak. I don't think Jeanty is that type of a prospect. So if we're just talking about most special backs in the last 25 years, would I have him in that group with them? I would not. Next group, yes, I would. So he's not like a top 5 back in the last 25 years, in my opinion, is basically what I'm saying. But he's in the next group. So like, that's still pretty high praise. So give me a break, people. I still think he's awesome. Really good feel as a runner. His contact balance is awesome. He's very interesting because he breaks a ton of tackles and he runs with incredible balance and physicality, I would even say, but he is not a violent runner. He's not looking to truck stick people or run people over. He doesn't run anything like Quinshon Judkins, like even from a style standpoint, where Judkins just wants to hurt everybody that he can find on the football field. That's not how Jeanty runs. Like, there's a real finesse to his game, and there's an unbelievable amount of, like, I have no issue with contact whatsoever I know it's going to be hard for you to tackle me, but he's more of a like, keep them churning, keep driving. He doesn't look to dish out punishment, not throwing guys on the ground, not trampling people. Like that's not necessarily his style. He isn't bull in a china shop, but he has the bull in him still, like if that makes sense. So I think that's really like what you see in his game as a pure runner. I think he's definitely the best guy in the class. The thing that I think puts Hampton in the same tier as him, it depends how people want to do tiers, but I just think Hampton might be the better all-around back. Jeanty will do things in pass protection. I think people have taken like his 4 best pass protection reps and just clipped them together and posted them on Twitter every time that they feel like getting a lot of reaction on Twitter. He has some good reps. He has a lot of really bad reps in pass protection. I think he knows where to be. The form, the technique are really bad. He'll often just throw a shoulder at some guys, get run over. I mean, you watch, 4 or 5 games, he's on the ground a couple times every game in pass protection. So you're not even really a speed bump at some point. So I think he's got a lot of work to do there. I think he has tons of ability and the smarts are there. And so I think he's actually going to end up being pretty good at it. Hampton's like ready to play now. And that is just so rare for a college back. Like you watch him pick up protections, you watch him scanning, you watch his technique, you watch how he takes eyes, and the athleticism are there too for Hampton. I think where he could be a flex guy, he could move around your formation. He could be a guy that actually goes out and runs real routes, and he does at UNC. 2 years ago, Jeanty was used more as a pass catcher. This past year was really disappointing. The usage was disappointing, and then the routes were really just when he did run them. I mean, there was just nothing. And again, Jeanty is getting like he's putting the team on his back every single week. He's probably exhausted, and that probably goes into it. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying the tape doesn't really show a really good polished route runner. He dropped a couple passes this past season. Catching outside his frame looked really uncomfortable. He has a stocky frame, which is great as a pure runner, not as advantageous as a pass catcher. Hampton just has the everything you want at the position for every single down. So it's sort of a flavor thing, but Hampton's not the pure rusher that Jeanty is. I think he's very good. He's not the pure rusher that Jeanty is, but because the pass game is so important in today's NFL, I think it could make up the ground. Like it wouldn't shock me if you told me Hampton ended up having a better career than Ashton Jeanty. I would not be shocked by that, even though I have Jeanty higher than Hampton.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting take, especially since you're not hearing a lot of people express that, right? Most people seem to think there's this gaping difference, and no one wants to ever even question Jeanty. So it's nice to kind of hear some different.
You found the right guy, Paul. I'll question anything.
So I think that's good because I do think there's a scenario where like Omarion Hampton, if he goes to, let's say, Denver, and we know Sean Payton has had a lot of success and his run game's always been very successful, like he could step right in there and have a really fantastic, right off the bat rookie year. I think Chicago's a little bit more set up than Vegas, but I don't know if Pete Carroll's going to be able to control himself. I just feel like Pete Carroll's going to pull the trigger at 6, and it's just, and like I think I was joking with Matt Waldman on the last pod, like Pete Carroll's crazy enough that he'll take like Ashton Jeanty at 6 and he'll take like another running back in like the 5th or 6th round just because like he can't help himself, right? It was like Kenneth Walker in the following year, Zach Charbonnet, like he just like has this appeal for running backs constantly. So I think it's possible Hampton ends up in the better situation as well. Let's do a couple.
That would be interesting too, because Spytek, the new GM for the Raiders, comes from Tampa Bay, where they've really not valued the running back position at all in the draft. They've taken guys later, like middle rounds is where they've kind of went highest. And, he has described himself as somebody who's philosophy wise, pretty much lockstep with Light. I would say the one way in which he might be different is he has a pretty salt of the earth type dude, and those types can tend to gravitate toward running back. So that's why I'm so fascinated with it, is because I'm always trying to learn what's the approach of a new GM. The Raiders have a lot of needs and they could use a lot of players there. If they take Jeanty, I would think Spytek really believes in, like, they're getting a special player and he doesn't want to pass on that. And in some ways I could understand that, even though from a team building perspective for an organization like that, I wouldn't consider that a wise move. But the fact that I think Jeanty's going to be really good and that offense could eventually get there too would help a lot, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So I want 3 quick hitter questions at the running back position. You mentioned Quinshon Judkins before. Are you more team Judkins or team Henderson? I know they're very different players. If you, in a vacuum, obviously what else is on the depth chart could matter, but do you have a clear preference between the Ohio State backs?
I wouldn't say I have a clear preference, but I would say I was a little disappointed with Henderson, and I understand all the analytics people hate Judkins, and I get it. I'm not saying I have him in like the 3rd round. I have him like it's like a 3rd round type of grade. I think there's a pretty big gap between the first two guys, between Jeanty and Hampton, and then the next guys that I've scouted, with the caveat that this position, I mean, nothing matters at this position more than the offensive line in the scheme. I mean, are Bucky Irving and Tyron Tracy, like, I mean, Tyron Tracy is really talented. Are they like actually so much better than the guys that went ahead of them in the draft? I don't know. Like, I know that they were better in the scheme with the situations they were in for sure. You know, whether it was a schematic thing, Tracy, obviously with the pass catching ability, matters a lot too with the wide receiver background. I think there's a lot of things to get excited about, but yeah, I think that they fit their places very well, and they're very good players, obviously. But like, I don't know, like, I think that we do this in the running back class every year, where it's like, oh, these running backs late in the draft, So I'm not sure how to characterize all of that, but I would say that Judkins, to me, like, I just love the style of play. And I think in the past, he has done a lot more in the passing game. He went to Ohio State after Ole Miss, and he was like, you know what, this is like, I'm going to be in a role here. I know that. And he was, and Henderson was the better. And Henderson is a great pass protector, so I love that right away. He's smaller, so there may be some physical issues at the next level, but man, he knows where he's supposed to be. He's just smart. He's sharp. Judkins has flashed that in the past too. I think he can do more of it. He just didn't have to at Ohio State. And then Henderson's the home run hitter, which I like. I think that actually matters more than I used to think it did at running back. He just didn't make people miss. He didn't really create after the catch. When it was straight line stuff, yeah, he's gone. He wasn't like a big time creator with the ball in his hands. I didn't watch him and think, you just got to get this guy with the ball. He's so electric. He has great linear. I think that that's valuable. I just think there are other things that really are valuable, a lot more valuable. And to me, Judkins had the better vision and feel as an inside runner than Henderson did. So I think there's just maybe a little more meat on the bone with Judkins for being a part of a backfield, where Henderson's role that he's going to fill in the NFL, he'll be good at. I just don't know that he'll give you all the dynamism that people often want from that role in the NFL. So, maybe that means I think Judkins is a little bit higher for me, but I mean, they're really just totally different flavors, and Ohio State was very lucky to have both of them.
Yeah, for sure. And this class really does have every style running back you want. And that's going to be the last running back question here. If we're probably talking the guys late round 3 to anywhere on day 3, do you have a favorite to classify as like more of the power back type player? And that could be Scatterbo, Ollie Gordon, Damian Martinez, Taj Brooks. And then on the flip side, is there more of a guy in that range that you like maybe a little bit better than most in terms of like more of the space player to get him out in space, whether it's a Dylan Sampson or a Jaden Blue or Brashard Smith converting from wide receiver to running back this year? Do you have a little bit of a preference of more of a power guy and more of a space guy that you like a little bit, maybe more than some of the others in that grouping?
There's honestly, because I haven't gone, I've probably gone more deep in every other position except for running back in this class, just because I think there's 30 guys and I'll scout 20 of them. And then somebody I didn't scout will end up running for 1,000 yards because he's with the right system. And it just drives me insane every year. I just get so frustrated. I'm like, what's the point of even doing this? Like, these guys just, A, it's so health dependent, and B, it's so situation dependent. But I really did like Devin Neal from Kansas. Just a balanced player. I think he's ready to play. He's just somebody, I don't know there's ever going to be game-breaking ability with him, but we can catch the football, can protect. He's really decisive and smart as an inside runner. I think he has enough juice to get the edge. So he's probably the guy I would say that I'm probably most excited about. I could see a real path where he ends up being better than Judkins or Henderson, just because there's a more well-roundedness that keeps him on the field, where those guys might be a little segmented in their roles. I just think he's way more versatile than Caleb. I know Caleb Johnson is some people's flavor. I think he'll be effective in the right scheme, but the scheme is just so specific. He doesn't do anything in the pass game. Like, the protection stuff's a major issue. Like, how do you get him on the field? How valuable is he when you can find a guy like Caleb Johnson, I think, in every draft. So I just wasn't as big a fan of him. I think Scatterbo he's okay. Like, again, I just don't see enough explosiveness with him. I like his style. Can he be part of a backfield? Sure. Can he play in the NFL? Yeah, I think no question there. Can I find a guy like this most drafts? I think you probably can. RJ Harvey's the guy I want to watch more of. And then an answer to your next question about just a space guy, to me, that's probably Jaden Blue. And I say this with a lot of hesitancy because he probably should have gone back to school and like been a real starting running back for longer. I just think he's really explosive with the ball in his hands. he made a lot of plays for Texas, and they obviously afforded a lot of space. They got guys on the outside. They're giving them a lot of space with the way that they run their routes, and they're running verts, and they're checking out. He's got room to work with. He is just really quick. He plays to like his numbers in terms of testing. Like, I think he's really quick. He can eliminate angles, and that gets me excited. I just have no idea as a pure runner, like if you're getting a lot of anything. He could just be Justice Hill type of player, which I think Justice Hill is a really good player. I think that's a really helpful player, but no NFL team does believe that Justice Hill is like anything more than a piece in the backfield so far. And so like, if that's sort of the player that he is, I think that's a nice role in the NFL, but that might be the ceiling.
Yeah, and Jayden Blue is so explosive. And I remember the first time I watched him, I legitimately thought, because I always, when I watch podcasts on YouTube, I always speed them up at either 1.5 or 2.0 speed. When I turned on Jayden Blue, the first time I saw him and I saw him break away a run, I was like, am I on 1.5 or 2.0 speed? Like, he was just like a blur. I was like, it doesn't even look real. I think it has to be on like, faster speed. Like, so sometimes it's just like, and it was like, no, it was actually on like 1.0. And I'm just like, wow, like that doesn't even look real when he got to the edge one time and then just took off. So he does have that, but I agree with you. He should have went back. Probably could have had a very effective year there. If Arch is as good as, Texas hopes and the pedigree his, it would have been interesting to kind of have him there as a big time weapon. Let's take this to the pass catchers. I'll hit you with one tight end question and one wide receiver question. We'll get out of here.
Okay.
I correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember seeing it on X that you are a Loveland above Warren guy, which correct me, that is right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. And I do see it that way with you as well. So maybe elaborate, because there's not a lot of people who I think see it like that. So they've heard my takes on why I like Loveland a little bit more than Warren, and especially in terms of transitioning to the next level here. What is it about for those two for you of why you prefer Loveland a little bit more to Warren?
I think Loveland's a better blocker. That's probably one of the blow people's. Early on in the process, Warren developed this reputation as a great blocker. I'm not sure why. It's that he's big. Maybe he knocked a guy down once and that clip went viral. They don't even ask Warren to block, really. Excuse me. So I think that's a major concern with Warren. Like, they don't ask him to do stuff he'll be asked to do in the NFL playing this position. Whether that's from a route running perspective, the running the full route tree, they don't ask him to do it, especially consistently. And if you watch how often he gets man coverage and what he does against it, it's always a contested catch or an incompletion, but it's going to be contested. He can't create separation against man coverage. Yet, this isn't saying any of this can't be learned with Warren. He is an older player who didn't really break out at all until this season, in a very unique role, which he was force-fed touches because he's really good after the catch. He's super physical, super aggressive. I think he's like a good functional athlete. I don't think he's an explosive athlete, but a good functional athlete. And because he's so big and physical, I mean, Penn State was like, yeah, we'll just use this guy. Like, he doesn't have to test great to be used in that way. So I think that they found a way for him to be really productive in a huge part of their offense, whether it's the direct snaps, the carries, really unique, really fun player in college. I don't think he's going to be bad in the NFL. It's just a massive learning curve for a position that's already traditionally extremely hard to project to the NFL and requires a ton of ability for a tight end. Like, you have to be able to do so many different things at this position in the NFL. He just hasn't done a lot of those things yet, and Loveland has done a ton of them. And so even though I think Loveland, you could make the argument Warren has a higher ceiling as a blocker than Loveland. You could make that argument because he has more size, and he does. He's bigger and stronger. I understand that. But he's going to have to learn what he's supposed to do, and he's going to have to be able to execute as a blocker. Right now, the technique is just a mess. He's a mess on the move. He's a mess in the trenches. He can catch a guy, flush and knock somebody over or something like that. But snap to snap, it's not pretty when he is asked to contribute, and they didn't ask him to do a ton of stuff, I think, because of that. He was another type of piece for their offense. He just isn't that special of a playmaker where you're going to force feed the ball into his hands at the NFL level. I'm not saying he can't be part of your offense, but that has to be like an ancillary piece, not the primary. And so with Loveland, you just see, real legit speed. I think he runs 4.5s. He is really fast for this position. And then the separation he creates out of the break, like, he was open all the time this past year. The quarterback play just couldn't get him the ball. He played injured this past year. He blocked injured this past year and was still very effective. There's times where he gets big boyed for sure in the trenches, but from a technique perspective, from a tenacity perspective, he gets after people. He executes NFL stuff, an NFL type of offense at a high level. And so that's really like, I think that the learning curve for the position is just going to be way easier for him. And I think he's just a way better athlete. I think he's a way better athlete, catches the ball outside his frame extremely well. Both guys are pretty good in contested situations. Loveland got 75% of the way through the catch a lot this season and didn't always finish reps. Year before, he finished them all the time. I think he's just got to get to a point back to that where he's finishing a little bit more on the ball. Hard for me not to think that playing with one shoulder wasn't a part of that when he has this amazing catch radius. He just, I mean, his easy pluck and elevation and adjustment to the ball, like he just is really smooth. So yeah, I mean, I think Loveland's a legitimate, like, blue chip type of talent. The more I watch, the more convinced I became of it. And I think Warren is a good tight end prospect who I'd really be interested in taking, but I don't see the top 10 buzz with him that I see with Loveland.
Yeah, I'm really hoping Loveland does not end up with the Colts. That's the spot where it's like they have enough playmakers they can get the ball to. I don't want to see Loveland go there. I mean, listen, maybe they have a new quarterback in a year or two. But yeah. But right now, Indianapolis is not the spot that's going to maximize Colston Loveland's overall skill set, and I think what he could produce if put in the right type of offensive scheme. Let's take this to the wide receivers. One question. Which Iowa State guy do you prefer? Jaylin Noel, Jayden Higgins, and based on that, is it also, when you evaluate those two, is it almost a preferencing in terms of your overall general evaluation at the wide receiver position? Do you tend to gravitate a little bit more to the separator, smaller, faster route runner separator type, or the guy with the really good ball skills, the prototypical size, frame? Do these guys kind of fit that narrative for you? And if so, maybe just expand upon it a little.
I'm not a big fan of either of them, to be honest.
Okay.
I think
I'm bringing up all the guys that you're just not as high on.
Well, people have really become fans. I mean, early on in the process, I would say I was pretty much where most people were, like where I think they're round 3 type of guys. Like, I think that's sort of where they're at. Noel is a tricky one because his role is really important in the NFL. Like, I think his role is one that will only matter to a certain number. Have a guy that runs every route at full speed. That is really helpful for a team construct standpoint. You need guys who open up things for other people, and he will run every route like it's his last. And I give him a lot of credit for that. I think he's fast. I think that can be effective and a healthy piece for an offense, but he's tiny and he really only does one thing well, in my opinion. And it's vertical balls. Tracks the ball pretty well on those. And he's got real speed, but he's not going to play on the outside. How many NFL teams need a vertical slot? How many NFL teams will rely on a vertical slot? To me, his game is kind of like Calvin Austin's, where like that's what he does. And for 4 plays a year, that's going to really look nice. But excuse me, he doesn't really create a lot in the full route tree. He doesn't really break guys off. He doesn't really create on the in-out stuff. So what is he? And he's not going to block for you. A lot of teams are gravitating toward bigger slots. He doesn't really play outside, nor is he really built to play outside, I think. I'm just not quite sure how he gets on the field enough to have a huge impact on what you're doing as a team. I do think his speed's for real. I know some people are like, I don't think he plays that fast, but I think he plays pretty fast. I think he's pretty explosive in that way. I think he could, in the right team, there's a couple teams I think where it could be like, oh yeah, he would fit. He would make so they could maximize him. Maybe, I don't know, it would make me look bad, but maybe statistically he has 5 touchdowns at the end of his rookie year. And people are like, see, but when I watched him, like he didn't, I mean, guys run through his back on any of the underneath stuff. He's not a finisher through contact really in that way. He could track the ball down the field and catch it like through contact that way, but not with guys closing on him, not with guys closing on the catch window. Physicality at the catch point really bothered him. Length at the catch point is going to bother him. He has shorter arms than guys who are smaller than him in the league that play his same role. Calvin Austin's one of them. Malik Washington, the guys like that. So there's just not a lot of length. He's running back. He's like a running back like build sort of with how thick he is and everything. And I just think the all around route tree just wasn't where it needed to be for him as a player to be like a really versatile slot. He's a very specific type of slot. traditionally that type of player plays about 15 snaps a game for a team. And so I just have a really hard time seeing how he fits in the modern NFL, even if people like the explosive traits, like those sell at wide receiver, I understand. But if they can only be used in a specific position, one specific spot on the field, and that specific spot also you need guys who can run in and out stuff and block, how do you justify putting them on the field for most game script situations? I just don't know that you do. With Higgins, I think there is potential there, and he could actually, I have him a little bit higher. He could make me look bad for that, maybe. I just think that he's not a finished product. There's a lot of broken routes. He's not looking for the ball when he should be. There's a lot of sort of extra steps in his routes. I think there's just a lot of lack of polish. He's big. He tested well. I give him props for that. I don't think he looks like that amazing athlete on tape. He will make some contested catches. He will miss some contested catches. He's in a lot of contested catches because I don't think he's a really good route runner at this point in time. Just too much up and down for me on the tape. I think there are some really good plays. There's not a lot of consistency for me. But if he could find consistency in the NFL and maybe in a better system, he would. I would actually be like, oh, I can see a path maybe. But I just don't think I'm ready to take that risk for, an Iowa State guy. I don't know that that's like that I feel strongly enough about the overall skill set to want to go down that path.
Yeah, you bring up some valid points, and I do have some concerns about Jayden Higgins. I could see them even using him as like a little bit of a power slot because they do have some concerns about him winning down the field. I can't have you end on two guys you're not that high on. Give me one name, quick hitter, wide receiver, not in that like top 4, top 5, the guys that are probably going to go round 1. Give me a day 2 wide receiver that you like maybe more than most to end the night.
I'm a huge Kyle Williams guy. I think he's really, really good. He's wide receiver 6 for me in this class. Outside of like the consensus top guys, I'd say he's probably the only one that I would take in the second round, I think, in this draft that I would feel really good about taking in the second round. I just think he's speed, explosiveness, catch the ball down the field. He can run in and out stuff, makes plays after the catch. That's another thing when you're comparing him to Noel, which almost everybody seems to have Noel over him. No comparison after the catch. Williams was way more effective, got way more opportunities. They didn't give Noel those touches because he wasn't effective. He caught less screens than almost every receiver in the class, less manufactured touches than almost they don't see him that way. And so to me, that was a big difference. When I watched Williams, he was a guy that the longer he was there, the more they wanted him to get on the ball and the more they wanted to make him the focal point of what they were doing. And then this year, the big breakout, 14 touchdowns, beats Travis Hunter down the field. Like he is really like legitimate high-end reps against good players. Hard guy to press. He gets vertical on people. I think he can run the in-out stuff. Now he's small. I think that the small frame could matter for sure. The blocking, some of the details lapse at times for sure as a route runner. He's got some work to do to get all the way where he needs to be, but he also just plays with the bravado of his game is really compelling to me as a player. When you combine it with he's a smaller guy, yeah, you better play with an edge. You better take every matchup personally, and he does. And they rave about his work ethic. So I feel really good about him as the 6th guy in this class. I think that became more clear to me that he belonged in that group above the Higgins and the Betch and the Noel and those kind of guys. The Trey Harris's more so than with that group. I think he was a notch above those guys.
Yeah, great way to end it because I'm a big Kyle Williams guy. He's in my top 10 too. And I think there's a lot of connecting pieces. I would not be stunned if he's the Titans' first pick at the top of the second round. Give Cam Ward his old running mate. I think his stock is elevating, that he's going to go in the top half of round 2. And I would not be surprised if the Titans pull the trigger to get Cam Ward someone he already has a comfort with. And I'm sure Cam Ward will be pounding the table for him as well if they had a good rapport there when they played together. John, thank you so much for this. I know it's a really busy time of the year for anybody who does draft content and football content. So I greatly appreciate you giving me about 45 minutes to hop on here. Please let the audience know where they can find you on Twitter, any work you're doing, podcast you want to push, promote anything so my audience can find more of your work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, always thanks for having me. This is always a ton of fun to do. You can find me on Twitter at Ledyard NFL Draft, Ledyard NFL Draft. You can also find all my work is over at Audibles and Analytics, which is my Substack. It is a subscription Substack. It's $5 a month or $50 for the year. You get access to absolutely everything when you do it. I know some of your listeners may not care as much about the Bucs and Steelers content that I do, but a lot of it's NFL content. Ollie Connolly and I do a podcast at least twice a week in season, and it's all NFL based. It's not team specific. It's all, we look at every team around the league every 2 weeks. Every team in the league gets covered, and that's kind of how we do it, going team by team throughout each week of the season. So that is kind of one of the features in season, and then we do out of season in the draft. Tons of draft and free agency talk, off-season talk, but we do right now, we're just working through each position group in the draft. So people can go back, any position group you want to hear in the draft. We do our tiers, our rankings, our evaluations. Why do we see things? So a lot of the conversations you and I have had about these players in expanded form, we podcast a lot longer than we probably should. So you get access to all that for $5 a month or $50 for the year. So the price is incredibly cheap for the amount of content that you get. It's a lot of pieces each week, and then all my scouting reports are on there as well. And so it's a pretty fun time over at Audibles and Analytics. So we encourage people to subscribe if they're interested in that. Until then, I will keep coming on this show and talking draft with you, my man, because it's always fun.
Absolutely, guys. Make sure you get over, check out all of the great work Jon's putting out over there, and support them, doing great, fantastic work. So on behalf of Jon, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us. And we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.